Yeah, it's awesome to have you in. I feel like your work really needs no introduction. I grew up a huge fan of your films, and I know I'm not alone in that. But this film that you're here for in particular seems to be a bit of a passion project for you. It's called Blaze. It is the true life story of a sort of legendary musician, Blaze Foley, which I had never heard of.
Well, most people haven't.
Yeah.
The word legendary is weird because it's a secret legend. He's a legend in country western lore for crazed aficionados. You have to be deeply versed in Townes Van Zandt before you get to Blaze Foley. It kind of goes Willie, Merle, Whalen, Christofferson, Guy Clark, Townes Van Zandt, and then the secret. I call him the snuffleupagus of the outlaw country western music scene. Because you have to really geek out before you hear Blaze Foley.
Yeah, that whole chain of command there, I'd have to go several layers deeper. So when did you first hear of him? What was your introduction?
My introduction was through John Prine. John Prine had covered Clay Pigeons, and if you're a big Lucinda Williams fan, which is kind of go with me for a second, I said to my friend, who happens to be the lead of this movie, but this is 10, 15 years ago, I said, hey, man, John Prine just released, I think, maybe my favorite song he's ever written, Clay Pigeons. And Ben was like, no, that's Blaze Foley. I'm like, who's Blaze Foley? He's like, you remember Car Wheels on a Gravel Road, which is Lucinda's album, the song Drunken Angel is about Blaze Foley. I'm like, oh, yeah, he was shot and killed. And I was like, oh. And then I started he wrote If I Could Only Fly, that Willie Nelson had done. He wrote Election Day, that Lyle Lovett had done. So he was kind of this mysterious element. And as the internet started exploding and more music was available, what used to be very hard to find, Blaze Foley music, became easy. And Ben and I started sharing stories and sharing tracks that we would discover.
So was this something that you and Ben Dickey, who's so incredible in this role, and this is his first film,
This is
right?
his first film, yeah.
So did you guys talk about this for a really long time? Because he seems like such a random discovery of pure talent.
Yeah, well, he, as his father says to say, he's an overnight success. It just took 40 nights, 40 years. I mean, he is a beautiful musician, and I was a fan of his music. He was in a band in Philly called the Blood Feathers, and they were amazing. But they struggled, and over the years of being his friend, I realized I had a front row seat to how difficult the music business is. And when the Blood Feathers were breaking up, and Ben would tell you he was powerfully sad, and he's a big guy, and when he's sitting on your couch and he's sad, you feel it, and I was telling him to remember Blaze Foley. There's so many artists out there in the world that are working at a really high level, that they're contributing, but they're not finding a way in the commercial marketplace. Right? There's no avenue for them to make money, and that's shame on the marketplace, not on them. And I was saying, you got to keep believing in yourself. And he picked up my guitar and he started playing Clay Pigeons, and that was 2015 into 16. It was New Year's Eve. We were both. It was late at night, and I said, you should play Blaze Foley in a movie. And the more I thought about it, the more I sat on that, I couldn't sleep. It was like an electric shock went through me, and I was like, this would be a great idea. Because it would allow me to do something that I'd thought about. First of all, casting as a musician is a very good idea. I mean, Lady Sings the Blues, Diana Ross did it amazing. Christofferson has done it. Willie Nelson has done it. The huge, Bette Midler. I mean, there's lots of great musician actors. It's just David Bowie. It's a slight turn of the dial. And I knew that Ben could deliver a major performance and that he has something to say about Blaze. Behind you there's a picture of Charlie Sexton who's playing Townes Van Zandt. And Charlie has something to say about Townes' music. It's not a posture or a pose. He spent his life playing music. He knew Townes. So it was an exciting idea to say to these musicians, hey, let's go down the rabbit hole and really try to do a serious performance.
It's funny you use the phrase sort of down the rabbit hole. The way this film is structured is very fluid and really a journey that you take with these characters through time and location. and not necessarily linear in any way. It's very, I know you've written books, it's almost novelistic in the way it travels through time. As part of, you co-wrote the script, you directed it, how did you decide on the structure you wanted to tell this story?
From the first time I thought about it as a movie, even before I met Sybil, I had this idea where Ben could play Blaze, and there was something, if you listen online, there's this thing called the Outhouse tapes, which is, we dramatize it in the movie. It's right at the end of, it's a month before he was shot, Blaze played this concert, and he took all the money he had and he just recorded it on a little 4-track. And he tried to play as many songs as they would let him play, so they'd exist somewhere. I think he had a fear that something bad was going to happen to him.
Right.
And wait, I just lost my train of thought. What did you just ask me?
The narrative structure.
Oh, the narrative
of
structure,
film.
exactly. Well, this you see why I lost my train of thought is because I often do. It's the way my brain works. I would listen to these tapes, and I would listen to the people talking in the background and the people playing pool and spilling beer, and I kept thinking, what is he thinking about? And I kept imagining songs as a kind of time portal. The way that you could listen, let's say, for example, you're 10 years old and you listen to Hey Jude, and it means something to you, and you just love it, and you sing along, you love it, but you don't really think about what the words mean or anything, and then you fall in love and you're 21 and you share with your lover and you listen to Hey Jude every night before bed, and it's your guy's song and you love it in a different way and it means something else. Then you break up and you can't listen to it all anymore. And then 10 years go by and you turn it back on again and it moves you and makes you happy again. And all this time the song has been the same. And I even kind of wrote about this a little bit in Before Sunset. I've always had this kind of idea of, whether it's Mozart or Hank Williams, they're moving through time. And I find it really powerful. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be cool to make a musical where the songs just move through time? And then I find Sybil's book. She wrote a book. It's Blaze's, one of the great loves of his life. And she wrote a book called Living in the Woods in a Tree, and about their time in love and where he really learned to play the guitar, where he really pushed his songwriting forward in this treehouse. And in the memoir, she has the same relationship to time that I do. Part of the book is an older woman talking to a ghost, talking to the real man, talking to herself as a young person. It just, it flows like a waterfall through time. And I knew that we would have a great time making this because it was exactly the movie I wanted to make.
So you have this shared way of your train of thought going in different directions. Obviously, this is such a personal story for her.
Yeah.
What was your creative endeavor like to do it together?
She saw the movie as an opportunity to put this man who she loves, his music got squashed,
Yeah.
shot and killed in the street, and his music never got heard, and she really believes in him, She saw the movie as an opportunity to push the music forward, and she's an artist, so she wasn't confused that I never wanted to make a docudrama. I never wanted to reenact a Wikipedia page. I wanted to make a piece of art about human creativity, about love and self-sabotage and friendship and healing and death, right? And I wanted to make a piece of art about that and use Blaze's life and his music as a kind of meditative place to rest all this, And she got that. I explained it right off the bat, and she didn't have to do it. She was like, okay, that sounds like a cool idea. And the more we got into it, the more it was clear that Blaze the man, he liked art. He would want us to do that more than nobody could reenact him.
Right. Well, and it's so true. When you make these kind of films, it's not your job to be a journalist.
No,
It's a
that's
balance.
a different job. And we live in an amazing time where you can see this movie and then you can Google him, and then it can take you to the real music. It can take you to Ben's music. We live in an amazing time. But the point of Raging Bull is not to reenact Jake LaMotta's life.
Right.
They're making an unbelievable movie But it's what Jake LaMotta means to Scorsese, what he means to De Niro, and you feel their blood and their sweat all over it, too. Not just Jake LaMotta. You feel all the people who worked on that movie.
Absolutely. Well, you just gave me quite the in with Raging Bull, because you have another fantastic movie this year, First Reformed.
Mr. Paul Schrader.
Yes, which, for those watching me not know, he wrote Raging Bull and
Taxi Driver, Last
Taxi
Temptation of
Driver's incredible.
Christ, American Gigolo, Light
Yeah.
Sleeper. Yeah.
Just a few.
Just a few.
They're fine.
They're fine. Affliction's
Yeah.
okay.
And he made this other movie that's fine this year that has like an okay performance from this guy. It's like maybe one of your best performances,
Thanks.
I think. And was so blown away by the depths you guys go to without really beating it over the head, I don't feel. When you do a performance like that, and it... Actually, I'm going to sidetrain that question because I'm
Okay.
curious about something else. Was your dynamic with him as collaborative as some of the other films you're known for doing, such as with Linklater, and where you really have a lot of say in the scripting and that kind of thing?
I would say there is something very old-fashioned about my relationship with Paul. Paul is a world-class writer. It's different than working... Richard Linklater is a wonderful writer, and I've written with him, and I've read lots of his scripts. I just read a new one. It's absolutely amazing. But his ego, his identity is rooted in directing movies. The script is a part of the process that creates this finished thing called a movie. And Paul really is an old-fashioned screenwriter. I mean, it's meticulously built. So it doesn't need the same... You know, when Rick is working with you, it's almost like Mike Lee. He's inviting you to join his band. He's asking you to come up with a guitar solo for this section. He wants you to do it. Do you know? And he's picking you because you're like-minded, and he's believing in you. And that's a really thrilling process. With Paul, I really valued it because he gave me one of the best roles I've ever read, and he asked me to give him a performance. And it wasn't a lot of talking, and it wasn't a lot of... I mean, his first question to me, when I met him, I'd read the script, I told him I loved it, and he said, "Do you know what a recessive performance is?" And I said that I do. There's a certain kind of performance that leans in, and he's entertaining you. She's juggling, she's dancing, she's amazing, she's dynamic. And there's another kind that says, "No, don't look at me. Nothing's over here." And it's asking you to step forward. And it's a really interesting notion, and that's about where once that direction was set, I understood what he wanted from me. And it was really one of the most challenging things, but it was old-fashioned acting,
Yeah.
you know?
I've never heard that term before, but I think that idea, recessive performance, is exactly what I was trying to say, where you're not beating the audience over the head with it. It's
You're
really lovely.
inviting the audience in. One of the things that made, like, for people who love acting or love movies and stuff, one of the things that made Bergman so amazing was that he had these great theater actors, these Swedish actors, and they had done plays. They really knew each other really well, and he could really write for them and really create these worlds. And then they could take their work and erase it. When you watch a great Bergman, it doesn't seem like anyone's acting. And it's but it's just electric because of that.
So being that you didn't have this super back and forth relationship on coming up with this character and this performance, and we don't have to talk spoilers if you don't want to. If you do, we can put up a warning. The ending is a very haunting moment in that film, and I'm curious for you as a performer, because Paul Schrader has said that it intentionally can be read two ways. As a performer, do you have to decide on one of those being true to commit to that performance in that moment?
That's a very interesting question. My answer was yes. So I really wanted to know what is happening so that I can play it. And Paul said that a great film rings a bell. A great film starts as you walk out of the theater. And you don't have to like it. You You don't have to agree with it. Doesn't, but it rings a bell. You know, the one I often think about, One Flew the Cuckoo's Nest, when McMurphy's had a lobotomy and everything's gone back to normal, and you see Chief throw the sink through this guarded, you know, this locked window and break the window, and he runs and he jumps into the woods and he's running, and you hear these drums, and you don't really know what it means. It means something, but they don't tell you what it means. They're inviting you, what do you think?
Yeah.
You know, and I realized as Paul was talking to me that he very clearly actually answers that question. People are so used to everything being so spelled out that they find it frustrating. But early in the movie, I tell the young man when I'm first counseling him that this guy's really depressed, and I basically say that wisdom is holding hope and despair in your hand at the same time. And I realized as he was not answering my question that he had already answered it, that I was playing two things at once. I was playing hope and despair, and that I was going to go around. It was the longest damn kiss of my life, not to be a spoiler.
It's a lot, yeah.
Long kiss, and I had to do both.
Yeah. I like that answer, and I think that line resonated so much, so of course it would tie into the finale. I'm curious, as you're a filmmaker, you're an artist, you're a writer, you're an actor. When you look at the film industry and how it's evolving these days with the rise of streaming services or even something like MoviePass, does that make you more excited? Does it make you nervous that things could be overthrown in that way so quickly?
Look, everything's always overthrown.
Yeah.
I mean, that's life, man. One wave comes in and another wave leaves, right? It's the way of nature, and it's powerful. We live in an amazing moment. Technology is exploding. Everything that I was taught, and the angle when I was 18, finishing Dead Poets Society, first time being interviewed and stuff, the world looked very different from where I was sitting than it does now. What is a movie? What isn't a movie? What those words are different. There's still an unbelievable value about watching a movie with another group of people. And people said, you know what? People said when the TV happened that the theater would die. Guess what? The theater didn't die. It's evolved and changed, but people still like to go see a live rock show. There's nothing like seeing Neil Young rip a guitar solo in some little dive bar when you're one of 150 people that actually saw it, and you can't stream it. Right? It has a new value. Almost literature's changing. You know, the publishing companies are getting really excited about how they do their binding again, because they want you to what's the difference between owning a book and reading it on your phone? Well, let's make it worthwhile. Let's put it on good ink with good paper. And then you see it's hard. It's changing. I'm not saying it's gone well. It's never been easier to record an album. You know, if you and I had an album to do, GarageBand's pretty damn good.
Yeah, really.
You know what I mean? You can make stuff sound good. Well, but how do you get anybody to listen to it? Making Blaze, I mean, you know, this would have been unthinkable when I was a kid. We went in there Gonzo style. We came out with a movie that looks amazing, you know? And we made it on a shoestring budget. We called it With Love and Duct Tape. And it's big. There's nothing that I wanted for the movie that would be better if I had more money. There's nothing, you know. That's amazing, but still hard to get it out there, because we're living in a world where there's somebody spending $120 million on a movie, and they've got a $50 million advertising budget. So for me to say, hey, don't just watch one kind of movie. Remember, there's movies about people too, and there's movies about feelings and hearts and sweat and life and love, right? You know, it's hard, but I'm not scared of that. I mean, I think that life is change and art changes. It always has changed. I mean, I got to work with Sidney Lumet, right, at the end of his life, and he started in live television. Well, what if he was scared of Marlon Brando? He wasn't. When change happened, he saw it and went, oh, wow, it's different now.
Got to keep up with it, right?
You just, you know, it's one of the things when we shot Before the Devil Knows You're Dead, you know, it's one of the first, I think, it was the first movie I shot all on digital. you know? And it's funny, it already looks retro. It's a different kind. It already has that kind of feel that Dog Day Afternoon had.
People have, I agree. Most digital films from that era look very retro right
They
now.
already look retro,
If you
yeah.
look at Michael Mann's Public Enemies, it looks
Yeah.
super retro.
Super retro, yeah.
It's just people hadn't quite nailed the format yet,
Yeah.
or it changed how we use it now. So one of the cool things about that, though, is you talk about how hard it is for a film like this to maybe find a bigger audience,
Yeah.
especially in this day and age. Something like streaming services allow that to happen.
Yeah.
Once it's on Netflix, it's in everybody's home, and it's
amazing like
insane.
that. I mean, I'm always pleasantly surprised. I did this movie, Born to Be Blue, about a jazz musician, Chet Baker, and very few people saw that in the theater. And invariably, if I go walk around, somebody will come up to me and say they saw it last night.
Right.
You know, and it's great. There's a movie I did called Predestination that kind of didn't really get released. It's a
Good,
sci-fi
though.
movie. It's a good film.
Yeah.
And you can find it. People come up to me out of nowhere, say, I watched it last night or 3 weeks ago. And I love that.
That was one of your cool genre films, and I like that you do this occasionally. I'm a horror girl, so I invariably was going to take this conversation here at some point.
There, yeah.
Something that I find fascinating, we were just doing a podcast earlier, we're talking about the Purge TV show. Something you started on a micro budget, doing a favor for your friend Jason Blum, has become a massive franchise, spawned a prequel, spawned a TV show. What is that like for you, starting with something that was made on such small means, to see it become this dominating franchise?
Well, it's awesome because, first of all, it lets me believe in my own literary taste, which is just because I read that script and it's a pretty incendiary idea. It's a really exciting idea, this idea that in the future there'll be a world where rich people don't care when poor people put violence on each other, right? It's like, whoa. The movie's really an intense. James DeMonico is a really smart person, the creator of that.
Yeah.
And Jason and I really believed in him, and I love watching different kinds of artwork. You know, like The Purge in a lot of ways is an old-fashioned drive-in movie. You know, and there's a place for an old-fashioned
Hell
drive-in
yeah,
movie.
there is.
You know, and you can hide truly. If I said to you, do you want to see a very important film about race relations in America? It's like, not really. You know, thanks a lot, right? If you say, hey, you know, you take the premise of Get Out and say, do you want to see that? Yes, I do. Yes, please. That sounds amazing. And you walk out having just been delivered a thesis on race relations in America in a way that was fun, funny, wild, and enjoyable, right? So they're taking a subject matter that at its cursory glance, it sounds pretentious as hell, but you make it fun. You know, The Howling, one of my first movies was Joe Dante, and The Howling is an amazing movie about, you know, the Vietnam War and guys coming back and PTSD, and you can see these things as metaphors. You know, when I did Sinister, Scott Derrickson challenged me to do a part about the evil of our own ego and our own desire to be important, and the ways that we put our career ahead of our family through the monster of ambition, right? That's really what it is. That's what it is.
It's also scary as shit, though, dude.
Well, okay, and here's the thing that's amazing, and Scott said this to me, it's what I love about it, what I learned from him most is he said, no, we can hide a metaphor in here, but the metaphor is useless if the movie ain't scary.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, no, you don't want to go on a roller coaster ride that isn't fun. You can make the ride even more interesting and have it have twists and have it make it dynamic and make it worth watching twice, make it worth watching 3 times, but it's got to be scary.
Yeah.
You know, a comedy's got to be funny. Doesn't matter if it's socially relevant if it ain't funny.
Okay, so you have really, I love talking about genre with you. You have all these interesting perspectives on things. You don't strike me as somebody who's particularly tapped into social media.
Yeah.
Are
I'm trying to learn.
Oh, okay. Are you aware that your quotes on Logan caused a film Twitter war?
I sure did.
You saw that? Yeah. Okay.
But you know, one of the things that's cool about that is that's because for a long time, I thought about this a little bit, for a long time, comic books and people who cared about comic books were ghettoized.
Yep.
And it was made to feel small. And now they run the table. And there's been this giant switch in my lifetime. I mean, like, I'm a comic book geek. I've seen all those. The idea that I'm the one criticizing them is a joke, because there's very few things I enjoy more. It's something I try to teach my son, that something about being a geek is being real. That's what it means. I'm going to be real.
There's an earnestness to it.
Or just like, man, I love this.
Yeah.
And I don't think you should be scared to say that you love something or you hate something. And that's the job of movies and music and stuff. It's not to be liked. It's to stir up conversation. And I was talking about a much more nuanced point about money in America and what our obsession with the accumulation of wealth is. Some of the most talented, I mean, Scott Derrickson's Doctor Strange is amazing. Chris Nolan's Dark Knight, James Mangold's Logan. I cited those because they're my favorites, and people took me as criticizing them. What I was trying to say is we need a community that's making all kinds of movies so that it's a part of it. And I think it pisses people off because they don't want to go back to the ghetto where comic books weren't taken seriously as art. And I agree with that.
Yeah, and I think, there's a much bigger conversation to be had there about nuance on social media and how it always gets lost. But no, that's...
Especially one of the things that drives you crazy is, for me, what's hard is I'm doing a press conference in Locarno Film Festival with some Swiss Germans, some French, people. And it's a very different, and it's a long conversation, and people take some headline about... and imbue it with a meaning that wasn't present in the room.
Of course, yeah. So one of the other fun things before I run out of time with you that's been sort of buzzing on social media about you right now is this little back and forth love you're sharing with Nicolas Cage.
Oh, yeah.
And I just was personally curious, again, as the horror girl, have you seen Mandy?
Not yet, but man, I want to.
Okay, because...
That looks like a return to form in a big way. That's so playing at the IFC Center, I think, when I get home. Because it looks great.
And it's all that stuff you're saying about how you love the way he performs and, sort of walks back on the Stanislavski approach to naturalism a little bit. It's the perfect film for that.
Yeah, there's no doubt that Nick Cage is rock and roll.
Yeah, there you go.
Like, whatever rock and roll is, that's Nick Cage.
Yeah, I like that. Well said.
No, I've been I've been a fan of his, there's nothing that I've said recently that I haven't said 100,000 times at dinner parties throughout. It's something I really believe in about him, that he's a true leader and a revolutionary performer, and one in a million. And I'm so excited that there's whatever the next chapter is. That I'm excited that people are excited about Mandy, because it means I can't wait to see it.
We got to get you guys back on screen together soon.
Oh, yeah, that's where I was going with that, Lord of War. Man, if you haven't seen Lord of War, Andrew Niccol is he wrote and directed Gattaca, and he put Nick and I together in one of my favorite endings the ending of Lord of the War is really good, and Nick's amazing in that.
That's another underrated one on your resume,
Thank you, I think so too.
Yeah, that's a good one.
If I'm allowed to think things
you
like
can,
that.
You can think good things. I think you've worked hard. Yeah. So, I know I'm just about out of time with you, so what do I want to focus on? Of course, I want to focus on the Before trilogy, which is deep in my heart, as well as many people's hearts. I believe you said that feels like a trilogy, that there is a conclusion. How open are you to that not being the case in 10, 20 years?
There is... all that needs to happen is Julie to say, I have an idea. Or Rick to say, hey guys, I have an idea. We worked really hard on those movies. When we finished Before Midnight, it was about as tired as I've ever been in my life. There was something about taking something that's really important to you. Before Sunrise, it was such a risk to do Before Sunset. I love Before. It was, Julie and Rick and I, we had so scary to go, could we do it again? Then a third time, it was like doubling, like you doubled down once, got lucky, and now you're going to put the money on black again, And that one is a much more dangerous film. The third one was scary because you're not making a film about romantic projection. You're spinning the whole thing into another dialogue about romance, about romantic reality, and it was so hard to write and perform and think about, and I love that movie. So I love all three of them, but so to revisit it we would need an idea that was beyond. You don't want to cash in on those movies. You don't want to pour water in the beer. You know what I mean? It's too sacred. And there is something, to me, there's something about the way the first movie starts where you're watching an older couple in their 40s fight on a train, and the camera pulls back and you see a younger couple watching them. And then, whatever, 20-something years later, we are that couple.
Right.
And there's something about that symmetry that feels good to me, and it feels like a complete artistic experience. That doesn't mean that we couldn't start again in some new way, but it would need all three of us to be excited.
It must be something you get asked about a lot, because I know how much those movies mean to me, and that I'm not alone in that.
Yeah, my hunch is that Rick and Julie and I are going to work together. Jesse and Celine will appear, I just don't know how and what and where.
Right. Well, we were joking in the chat, I guess kind of joking, kind of true and sad. You should just make a more with you guys, and it'll be the saddest but best movie ever.
We have talked about that.
Really?
Yeah.
It's perfect, right?
It's perfect. We just, the only trouble is most of our fan base will, be not in the movie going aliveness,
Right. All right. Well, I got to wrap up with you. Thank you so much. You're a lovely person to talk to.
So are you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Be sure to check out Blaze, guys. And be sure to check out First Reformed, and keep an eye on this guy during awards season.